Vice Chair of the Federal Reserve, Leo Brainless, came out and said a CBDC will take 5 years for them to develop. Is this a good thing? My name's Eric. This is above my pay grade. Let's get into it. For those of you who don't know, CBDC stands for Central Bank Digital Currency. Now, at first glance, you might think this is very similar to what we use today because most people purchase things and get deposits into their bank account, and all it is just numbers on a screen. Very few people use cash. But central bank digital currency, what that does is essentially software that allows the government to program and track the money. So it is surveillance disguised as currency. And when asked about this power that potentially could be given to the Federal Reserve, and I do say given because your congressman and the president have to sign off on this central bank digital currency. So if you want it, then don't say anything to your congressman. But if you think potentially it's not good to have unelected bureaucrats at the Federal Reserve controlling your money and what you spend it on, then I would potentially talk to your congressman. But when asked about being given this power to the Federal Reserve, Leo Brainerd, or Brainless, came out and said, this time it's different because we're good people. And yes, of course, she didn't actually say that. But history has shown that if you give power to people, it, especially if they're unelected, it will be corrupted. And so how can a central bank digital currency be corrupted? Well, number one, it's programmable. That means you can turn it off and turn it on. And you could track every single dollar, we'll say, that goes into, let's say, my bank account. And so if they didn't like what I was purchasing that month, they could say, hey, you've spent too much on gas, for instance, and you no longer can spend your CBDCs on fuel this month, or you're hoarding too much groceries. So a lot of those things, they may say, we'll never do that. But again, if the capacity exists, it will be done. If it can be corrupted, it will be corrupted. And one of the things that Congress has done over the last decade or so, they give a lot of responsibility without a lot of left and right boundaries to unelected bureaucrats, let's say at the EPA, OSHA, and other, like the IRS, other bureaucratic organizations. So Congress kind of delineates, hey, you guys take care of people doing X, Y, and Z, but since they don't give them left and right boundaries as to if you go this far, then it takes congressional approval. If you don't do this, then it takes congressional approval. Then these bureaucratic organizations take on a life of their own, and they typically overstep people's constitutional rights. Take a look at the FBI and CIA and the Patriot Act for data on that. So Brainerd said that a CBDC will take 5 years to develop. And I have a couple thoughts on this 5-year timeline. Number one, if you're familiar with the crypto space, and even if you're not, that's fine. But you do need to understand that something like Bitcoin and something like a CBDC are two totally different things. For instance, Bitcoin, the value proposition of Bitcoin is that it is decentralized and that the government does not control it. That is why people like it, and potentially why people won't like a CBDC. But people in the crypto space are extremely smart, developers, and take it from me, people in the government, they don't have the same initiative to develop. So as the government's developing this CBDC, there's people that are way smarter than people working in the government that are developing ways around it. So the government's always slow to innovate, and the free market's always innovating around them. So I think that'll be a struggle, number one. And number two, I wonder how they'll get people. You got to think about the growing pains of CBDC. I don't think it's going to be overnight. People are just going to be like, okay, now I don't use dollars. I use a central bank digital currency. So why would somebody use a central bank digital currency? And my first concern is, what if people lose faith in the dollar? You cannot go to a central bank digital currency after people lose faith in the dollar, because all that is a digital dollar. It's the same thing. It has the same problems of printing and the fiat system. In fact, it probably has way more. And the fact that they don't want an open ledger, meaning people can see where the dollars go, and only the Fed can do that, you can assume it'll be exactly the same as the dollar, just in digital format with more surveillance. But I'm wondering how they're going to sell this, because if you think about a currency, the number one value is trust. And when people lose trust, people don't want to use it. And so they start bartering, or in a lot of other countries, what they do is just go to the dollar. But what happens when people lose faith in the dollar? Meaning it starts either inflating at this rate continually, which I don't think is probable, but at some point, and I'm going to do a video later this week, the debt burden of the United States is going to affect the value of the dollar. And so I think the transfer to CBDC has to be before that timeline, because once you lose trust, it's hard to get it back by saying, yeah, we have this new product that's just digital and it's the same. Your average consumer goes, okay, why would I want to use that? I'll go use Bitcoin or some other currency that has been working on the secondary market, because that's typically what happens when the currency inflates. There's some kind of black market, secondary market, where people are exchanging goods and services for an alternative currency that the free market chooses. So how will they sell it? I think they'll sell it, in my opinion, as a solution to a problem that they created, whether that be hyperinflation or depression. They'll say, look, we have these problems because of the dollar system. And if we could program the money, we wouldn't have these problems. You know how you're going to the grocery store and you have to spend $500 on a loaf of bread? Don't you hate that? And people will be like, yeah, I hate it, yeah. Well, if we had a CBDC, that wouldn't be a problem. And they won't really explain why, because it will be the exact same problem. Minus, now they can control what people spend money on by programming the money, turning it off and on, etc. So in theory, a CBDC allows them to use much more of a scalpel on the economy, meaning today they can raise and lower interest rates. But with a programmable money, they could say, okay, total economy can spend $2 billion on fuel this month. Okay, when that cap is reached, they can spend $1 billion on groceries, and they can turn off and turn on certain industries with the CBDC. Now, does that sound like something that the government would or would not abuse? Well, let's just look at history, and I think the possibility is 100% that they would abuse that power. So if you are not a huge fan of government overreach, don't give them more power, or at least more temptation to use that power. I think a central bank digital currency, it could be one of the most dystopian, government-controlled, top-down, tyrannical things that we'll ever see. And you just take a look at China, and if China's doing it, you should be like, If China outlaws Bitcoin, you should be like, I don't like China. I don't like their tyrannical government overreach. Why would they outlaw Bitcoin? Why would they implement a CBDC? Maybe because they want control of their people. And if the United States does the same thing, I don't think the Constitution's going to stop them, because it hasn't in the past. Okay? I know most of you probably think along the same lines, but if you have a relative or a person, and I would say most of the people that I talk to are probably indifferent to a CBDC because they have, you know, a life. And meanwhile, politicians are around the corner going, how can we steal control? And your average person is working hard, trying to pay their bills and feed their family. And they don't have time to worry about this stupid crap. But if you can educate them a little bit and say, hey, so here's the difference. Here's what a central bank digital currency and why it's different than the dollar and how it gives unelected bureaucrats control over your life. I think their ears would perk up just a little bit. So if you have a family member like that, please share this with them. Please leave a like and a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.